With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome to the Exploring More podcast. This week we are listening to another excerpt from the Women's Deepening Weekend 2021. Robin Thompson shares on the topic of healing.
Welcome back. How was free time? Was it good? I heard shrieks and yells. I'm assuming they were shrieks of delight and not terror and pain. It was good. What? Both? Terror and delight. We can hold both. Good. I hope this afternoon was restful, that the time of rest and play felt kind to you after a particularly weighty morning. So, welcome back. This morning, Sherry did such a wonderful job introducing us to our false self, that which we've created in response to the wounds that we've experienced. And Dana did such a wonderful job of sharing with us about the wounds we've endured, those shaping moments, and how every one of us has known heartache, some level of pain. We all have a tale of woe, all of us, that impacted us significantly and continues to impact us significantly. I appreciated, Dana, how you said that quote from Jerry Sitzer, "We must head east into the darkness until one can come to the sunrise." And then Dana said, you can't get there without going through. And so in our time this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like to go through the darkness. Someone asked me right after I shared the story in Dana's talk, she said, okay, so what do you do with that? This place that I find myself, experiencing the pain of that. And okay, I'm aware of that. She said, what do you do? Do you just pray and take it to Jesus and ask him to heal? And I said, I'm going to tell you at 4:30. So we're going to look at that for a few minutes today, the offer of healing. So what I want to share with you all this afternoon is good news that the wounds that we've endured and their impact and the messages that came on their heels and how we responded to them and handled them do not have to have the final say in our lives. They do not have to have the last word. They don't have to be the end of the story. The kind invitation of our God is for our healing, for our transformation, for our restoration, and for our freedom. Dana read Luke 4 this morning. It's worth repeating. And I looked up every version, Isaiah 61, sorry, they're the same. But I looked up several versions and pieced it together. It's a hybrid of all my favorite. Have you ever done that? You pick the version, the words that resonate. So we're going to read the Robin version, but it's all scripture. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me. So this is Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the wounds of, bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, those who are bound, to comfort all who mourn, to care for the needs of those who grieve, to bestow on them a crown of beauty in the place of ashes, the oil of joy instead of tears, and the mantle of joyous praise instead of the spirit of heaviness and despair. Because of this, they will be known as renamed mighty oaks of righteousness. I love that renamed. Planted by Yahweh as a living display of his glory and splendor. So when Jesus first began his ministry in Luke 4, of all the passages that he could have chosen to announce, this is why I'm here. This is why I came. This is the scroll that he pulled up, opened, and read. This is why I'm here. This is my mission, and I love that. This afternoon, we're going to focus on specifically his offer of healing. I came to heal the brokenhearted. Jesus wants healing for us. He wants shalom restored. He came to restore the shalom that has been shattered, the peace, the goodness that we were meant for, the delight, the honor. I was curious. I looked up in the Strong's Concordance, heal the brokenhearted. Like I wanted to see what those meant in the original Hebrew. To heal and bind up means to wrap, bandage, give relief, to heal, namely a wound. The broken, crushed, smashed, torn down, demolished, destroyed, shattered, fractured, hurt, injured, broken into pieces. This is what has happened to our hearts. Heart, the brokenhearted, heart is the inner part of a person. Soul, heart, mind, memory, thoughts, conscience, will, understanding. The seat of emotions and passions and seat of courage. That's fascinating to me. Jesus said he came to bring healing, his kind healing to our wounded, broken heart, mind, and being. And he invites us to join him in the process. This is what I'm learning. When we refer to healing, we're meaning our truest self is being restored. Our true self that Sherry was talking about this morning. That is what's being restored. Welcomed, uncovered, unbound, let up for air, cared for, nourished, and set free. I love that. As George MacDonald prayed, gather my broken fragments to a whole. Let mine be a merry, all-receiving heart, but make it whole with light in every part. To live, you know this as well as I do, to live is to hurt. Regardless of how we've been hurt, we all face a common question. What do we do with our hurt? What do we do with the pain? Should we ignore it? Should we just get over it? Should we optimistically hope that it's all going to be okay in the end? Dan Allender says in The Healing Path, if we fail to respond appropriately to the wounds that life and relationships inflict, our pain will be wasted. It will numb us or destroy us. But suffering doesn't have to mangle our hearts and rob us of joy. It can instead lead us to life if we know the path to healing. Healing is not the resolution of our past. It's the use of our past to draw us into deeper relationship with God and his purposes for our lives. That's what I want to talk about today. That is huge. That is so important. I wonder where you all are. I wonder how this is for you to hear all this. This is a lot. This is disruptive. This is provoking. And I want to name that. And I know, like someone said this morning, I can't remember who it was, maybe it was Dana, but who said, some of you might be thinking, and it's in my notes as well, I can't even relate to this. I had such an idyllic childhood, and I'm fine, and yeah, I didn't really experience any kind of harm, certainly not abuse. And others might be thinking, you have no idea what I have gone through. And I hold and honor that. And I hope that wherever this finds you, this can be the beginning of your path to healing with God. So I want you to invite you to stay present in your body and here and with us as we pray and commit this time to Jesus. Father God, we just take a deep breath in and thank you that in your kindness and in your goodness, you have made a way to bring healing. You have made our bodies and our minds and our souls and our earth and creation and in the context of relationships, how we bear your image. You have made so many creative, beautiful, powerful ways to invite us into healing with you. And I thank you for that. We commit this time to you, God, and pray that you would just come for each one of our hearts. We want to just agree with you that you have good for us And where we find that hard to believe, I pray that you would begin to show us that you are kind and that you are good and you long to bring healing to the places that have been broken and hurt and wounded. In Jesus' name, amen. So what I shared earlier in response to Dana's session, my story about that I didn't know that I had been wounded, thought I had just gotten some paper cuts, from my family. But I didn't think anything was really worth exploring because I didn't think it was that big of a deal. So I just kind of wrote it off. But Jesus, in his kindness, brought this piece from over here and that from over here, and they started to intersect and converge in a way that I could see it. I could see that he was inviting me to pay attention to these things that were bubbling up, things to explore with him, these places that were tender to me, like something bumps up against me and it's either tender and brings me to tears or triggers me and I have this over-the-top response that is anger or like, what is that? Where is that coming from? But I was beginning to see that there's something there. There's pain there. There's something unresolved there that was buried deeper than I realized. And it was affecting me, like I said earlier, in every relationship and in every way I move about my life. And it was affecting how I related to God and how I saw God and how I assumed he saw me. So I was beginning to see it and become aware of it, but like we say in Zoe, awareness doesn't equal healing. Becoming aware of something and seeing it is the first really important step to healing. But then what? Okay, we become aware of it, then what? I didn't know. I honestly did not know. I only knew to pray and ask Jesus, please bring healing to this place in me that's either hurting or where I feel stuck or the out of proportional response or whatever, just would you heal me? And then I would wait for the healing to come. That's all I knew to do until this past year. I'm discovering that Jesus wants to partner with me. He wants me to partner with him on this healing path, on this journey. He's inviting us on a healing journey with him. Dan Allender he talks about a healing path in his book of the same name. It's called The Healing Path, and it is so phenomenal. I can't recommend that highly enough either. But as much as I just want him to lift the thing, right? We just want him to take it away. Please just bring relief, bring rescue, take it away, or change me, or something. He has a better way. He wants to bring true healing, not just relief, I'm realizing. He wants to show us a kinder and a truer way. He wants to come and join us in the hurt and in the pain and in the discomfort and show us how to move in this with him. The process is actually where the gold is. It's the way through is where the gold is. But like Dana said, we first have to enter the darkness. And we actually have to enter into death. And it's what I have heard this past year is our healing journey actually parallels the death and resurrection of Jesus. It can parallel the death and resurrection of Jesus in really powerful, incredible ways. I'm also discovering that he wants to explore with me and with you how I'm handling my own young heart in the process. He's been inviting me to engage my story in a new way for me, brand new way.
Hey listeners, this is SJ. Just want to make sure you know about one of our latest resources. Just a couple of weeks ago, our Women's Guide team journeyed with more than 100 women through the Deepening weekend, which is our weekend initiative for women. We recorded each of the sessions and are making them available to you at our website, zoeoutpost.com. This resource invites women to experience healing, life, and freedom with Jesus. Visit zoeoutpost.com and search for the Deepening Weekend 2021 to find this resource.
So my healing journey began 1 year ago in April 2020. I love my daily walks in the neighborhood. During lockdown, height of quarantine, it was life-saving. It was grounding. It was beauty. It was life-giving. It was vitamin D. It was perspective. So I was on a walk this day and nearing the bend before we came to our street. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been walking for 45 minutes and I'm so aware I've been looking down. Do you ever do that? It's probably because I don't want to trip. But I was like, I need to look up. I want to look at the trees. I want to look at the blue sky. Like this time of year is so stunning and beautiful. So I looked up and I was like, oh my gosh, Jesus, I haven't even acknowledged you on this walk. Do you have anything that you want to say to me? Do you have anything that you want to show me? And literally within 2 minutes, this doesn't usually happen when I ask him this, so don't think this happens every single time. But this day, literally within 2 minutes, I started noticing everywhere I looked, there was a dad with his child outside, right? You remember quarantine. Everybody's working from home. All these dads and their kids on the end of my walk. And I see one dad and his son, they had set up this makeshift tennis court in their driveway and were hitting tennis balls back and forth. And some of us just got super creative during COVID. But there were all these dads out with their kids and their dogs. And I paused. Then I see this girl on her bike. She's probably 8 years old. And behind her is her dad. Just a few yards behind her is her dad. And she smiled at me as she passed me, as she met my gaze. And I was smiling at her. I just thought, how darling, this little girl. And she was just beaming. You could tell she was delighted to be on this bike ride with her daddy. And so as they passed, I'm walking. I paused and I said, Jesus, did I have moments like that with my dad? Sorry. Did not see this coming. Did we ride bikes together? And suddenly this memory came to me when I was around 7 or 8, which has to be the age of that little girl with her butterfly helmet on, with her dad that just passed me. And my mom and dad took my sister and I to a parking lot of a park to teach us how to ride two-wheelers without training wheels. That was the mission. It wasn't going well. My dad was trying to teach us, and it was just hard for me. It was hard, and it just was taking me forever to get it. It wasn't coming easily. I was struggling to stay upright. I remember at one point hitting a curb and crashing into the bushes and was so stunned at my dad's anger at me. But I think it was his frustration that I wasn't getting it quickly enough. This was taking forever. You know, he's got places to be. So as I walked this last April, I let myself remember how that was for me. How did that feel for me? Trying to remember how that felt in my body. You keep hearing me say that because I'm just learning this year that that's a thing. And that's important to do, that our bodies are brilliantly designed to cue us and to communicate to us when things are wrong. God designed us brilliantly. So I'm remembering in that moment how that felt. I remember the pressure to get it right. There was so much pressure on me to do it right and quickly. I remember my dad's stress level impacting my body. I remember my stress level in my body. I was embarrassed and ashamed for taking so long to get it. Didn't get it that day. And I remember crying hot tears getting in the car. No one said a word. Fun family time, right? Dad was pissed. We all knew to stay quiet. And I was hurt. I was really hurt and really angry that he had treated me that way. For me, naming that, what happened, remembering it and naming it, felt really important. It was really important to me. I remember feeling small, shamed, powerless, and alone. I cried as I walked in our neighborhood. I kept doing more loops. I wasn't ready to get home. And it seemed like a small thing on the one hand, but yet again, my body remembered how it felt, and it didn't feel small. It felt pretty significant and pretty important and worth exploring. So I was experiencing, as I walked, sorrow and grief for young Robin. And it felt kind. It felt really kind, and it felt honoring of my story. Instead of being dismissive and not letting myself go there, because I can do that. I think we're pretty good at doing that. Like, I'm going to deal with that later, or no, push that back down. I think if I cry, it will be a mess. I will be a mess, or whatever we do, whatever our agreements, however we roll in that. But in doing so, I've minimized it and thought it's just not a big deal. Even as I wrote the words, it wasn't really a big deal. He didn't hit me or anything. But when we go there, when we kind of make those statements, like when we're invited to explore and we're invited to go deeper, like Jesus just really led me there that day. There was no other explanation for it. I did not go looking for it. When we are invited there, and when we choose to dismiss or choose to diminish and choose to go to, he didn't hit me, that is a way of popping up out of that place and keeping us out of the very space that's really important for us to stay in and explore with Jesus. And that's where the gold is. That's where the healing is. That's where we allow ourselves to feel and to grieve on behalf of our younger selves. It's so important. So those tears that day were cleansing and brought an important first layer of healing. As I began my journey on the healing path this year, I'm still on it. But soon after that walk, I started the program that I mentioned at the Allender Center, the narrative-focused trauma care program, which helps facilitate healing and restoration through the engagement of our story, specifically stories of harm. And I've been learning how important it is to allow our heart, mind, and body to be curious about. I think Sherry used that word this morning, to be curious about and remember what it was like for us in our story, specifically in our family of origin. Adam Young said, there is no way to experience healing apart from taking an honest look at those stories that hold intense feelings, such as shame, powerlessness, terror, and a sense of betrayal. I know, and I believe Adam knows, that God can bring healing in an instant. Absolutely, he can and he does. But I think more often than not, he invites us to explore with him a little deeper, because oftentimes there's other things connected, and there's styles of relating. There are these defensive structures, the false self that we've created in those wounding moments that are still operating. If he just takes it away, we don't get to go deeper and explore and untangle with God some of those things. I actually thought this sort of healing happened only in the spiritual realm. Like, Jesus, take it away. And it does. Everything is spiritual. Everything is in the spiritual realm. But I thought our bodies were totally separate from the healing that would be accomplished in our heart and soul that God would bring. And yet we are created body, soul, and spirit. We are embodied beings, and we can't separate the mind from the body. It's a part of our design. So any harm that we experienced was against our body, soul, and spirit. So healing and integration happens within our body, soul, and spirit. So we must engage our body and our soul in the healing process. That's how God designed it to work. I never knew this stuff, and it has been a game changer for me. Our bodies were brilliantly designed by God. We hold in every cell, in every bit of our DNA, everything that has happened to us, both the good and the bad. Both when we have known delight and honor, and when we have known harm and abuse. We can't escape it. We can deny it, and we can try to bury it, and we can try to numb it. But our brilliant bodies will let us know what needs tending to and what needs healing. Several years ago, one of our daughters had been experiencing, I sigh because this is a big one, had been experiencing stomach gut issues for months, violently throwing up every day before school and before particularly stressful situations, which now I realize she was being triggered, but I didn't know what that was back then. She had irregular heart palpitations. She was having panic attacks, and we were 1 week away from a GI appointment, a specialist at Duke for her. They ran tests. We took her to all the doctors. She wore a heart monitor. And then the week before we took her to that GI specialist, we found out that she had been sexually abused several months earlier. So her body had been holding all that pain inside, all that trauma that her body and her soul endured. And her body was cueing her that something is wrong. Something needed tending to. Her body, soul, and spirit had been violated, traumatized. Our bodies weren't meant to hold that, keeping it locked tightly inside. And of course, our precious bodies were never meant to endure that kind of harm, that kind of violation, ever. So when we suffer sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional, psychological abuse, so often that pain and trauma is held inside when we keep it hidden and stuffed in, and it manifests itself in our bodies to the degree that we experience all kinds of physical, emotional, mental symptoms. We can get migraines, high blood pressure, autoimmune issues, anxiety, depression, dementia. The list is long. I can't tell you how many women I know that suffer from physical conditions that now they're convinced are a result of unhealed emotional, psychological, and physical trauma. And I want to really be clear that I'm not suggesting that every physical or mental condition is a result of abuse. I'm not suggesting that, absolutely not. I was listening to a podcast recently by Morgan and Sherry Snyder called The Body Keeps the Score, after the book by the same name, and it's an excellent podcast with some wonderful insight into this stuff, into healing. It's really beautiful. But Sherry was talking about how we have been formed by our relationships and how we've been formed by levels of danger and or security within those relationships. This is so powerful, ladies, in terms of how our bodies are in the world and how we experience being in our own skin. So in my own story, when I found myself on the receiving end of my dad's anger and when he would get triggered, I would feel overwhelmed. I would begin to shut down. I would hold my breath, and if I would breathe at all, it would be really shallow, rapid breathing. Every part of me would tighten and brace for what's coming. There was panic in my body. My brain went offline. When my body's limbic system takes over, I freeze. You know, the fight, flight, or freeze, I freeze. My body's amazing alarm system that God designed to keep us safe would cue me that I was in danger. And that is how He has designed our bodies so brilliantly. As I've looked back and considered these moments, I remember them actually, sadly, with a good amount of shame. Shame for being weak and powerless and silent, as I was unable to respond, unable to find my voice or my words, and unable to defend myself. On the heels of shame, I have felt contempt for myself and for my body and for my brain in those moments, for not getting it right, for not getting it quickly enough, for being slow. Contempt for that young girl, and now the not-so-young woman, where countless times I have demanded of her, why do you freeze when Dad or Michael or other men talk to me or approach me in a more intense way? Or when I'm in stressful situations or moments of conflict, even minor conflict. For me, there really is no such thing as minor conflict. But why can't I think in those moments? Why does my mind go blank? Why can't I formulate coherent sentences? Robin, why can you not think, talk, write normally? I'm typing this in like all caps, like that's how I'm feeling. I have repeatedly cursed my body, my capacity, my mind, and my brain for betraying me, when actually my body was doing the very thing it was designed to do in unsafe, harmful situations that brought stress and trauma to my body. My sweet body, your sweet body, your good body. But I have such sadness now. And then even some contempt with the sadness of, why did this take so long for me to see this? It's in these moments that our false self begins to be constructed. As young girls, we protect ourselves by building defensive structures that keep us safe. And I'll talk more about that. But here's one of the things that was really pivotal for me. What if we could choose? What if I could choose to interrupt the shame and contempt cycle and move a little closer to my younger self? What if I approached her with curiosity and kindness instead of shame and contempt? I really want you to hear this, if you hear nothing else today. We will not be able to experience healing in these memories and in these spaces if we are standing in judgment with contempt and blaming our young self for being weak, vulnerable, foolish, however else we're regarding our young self, other than with curiosity and kindness and tenderness and care. Dan Allender says in Healing the Wounded Heart, kindness begins the healing process as it soothes ambivalence, engages our heart, and calls our soul to wholeness. Yes, kindness. What if we were able to engage our story, enter our story with sorrow and grief on behalf of our young self and what she endured? That would be a game changer. It is a game changer. I'm speaking from experience. That would open the door to healing and integration and restoration. What if I had tears for 8-year-old Robin, which I have had plenty, sorrow that she didn't get what she needed in those moments, which was safety, kindness, compassion, patience, and good care. Remember, that's what we're meant for. We're meant for safety and goodness and delight and honor. If I had had those things would have brought healing in that moment to me. It's like Dana shared. I wrote it down this morning. She said, I wanted to be scooped up, cared for, and fought for. To name that so important. I'm sad for that young girl who wasn't protected. I'm sad for Dana, who wasn't protected, who wasn't seen, who wasn't heard, who wasn't attuned to, who was dismissed, who was shut down, who was silenced, who had no advocate. I'm sad for each one of us who didn't have those things that we were meant to know and experience. And what if we had appropriate anger for what happened to us? Anger can be a really important part of grief. Do you think you could allow yourself to feel and experience grief and anger that is so very deserved for what it was that you suffered? I'm angry for the evil that I see that has been at work generationally in my family in a way that diminishes, silences, and abuses women, that uses rage to control and overpower and shut down. I'm angry at that. I'm angry at what was done to me. I believe grief and anger are necessary, absolutely necessary for transformation to occur. I want to show you a scene that illustrates how important it is to identify and acknowledge what it is that we're feeling and to allow the memories to come so it can be named, so they can be named and grieved. This is from Inside Out.
Wait, stop! I want to get off! All right, thank you. We will. Her teacher hasn't even seen Riley all day. What was she wearing last? Do you even remember what... Riley!
There you are. Thank goodness.
We were worried sick. Where have you been? It's so late.
I know you don't want me to, but I miss home. I miss Minnesota. You need me to be happy, but I want my old friends and my hockey team. I want to go home. Please don't be mad.
Oh, sweetie.
We're not mad. You know what? miss Minnesota too. I miss the woods where we took hikes.
In the backyard where you used to play.
Spring Lake where you learned to skate. Come here.
Just think that's a beautiful picture of this. She says, wait, stop, I want to get off. I even think that statement is a great picture of an interruption to the cycle, the pattern where she's been stuck, and when she allows herself to remember the moments of goodness and to name what she's lost and what she misses. She allows herself to feel the sadness and the grief, and that's so important. She allows the tears to come. She also names that her parents don't want her to be sad and need her to be happy, and I can relate to that. But I love that Riley is making a choice for herself because she can't not anymore. She comes to a place where she chooses. She allows herself to remember and to name and to feel it and to grieve it. And that's then where she was able to experience healing in the context of good care. Best case scenario happens here. Not many of us, I would imagine, experience that, but where her parents came to her and they don't interrupt her. They don't try to cheer her up. They don't say it's going to get better. They don't try to give advice or give reasons. They just listen and say, me too. I miss it too. And they offer her care. And I love how they showed her face and even that sigh. It's healing. That's healing. That's healing. Integration is coming and healing is coming. That's how God designed it to work. So even if we didn't have parents or don't have parents or caregivers that made that kind of healing possible, that kind of healing is possible. And in a minute, we're going to talk about some ways that we can enter into that. But I also want to point out that this speaks so well to what we needed in those moments when we were 5, when we were 8, when we were 10. And also, if you're like me, you can't watch something like that or hear something like that and be thinking about, oh my gosh, my kids, how I've wounded my kids. And we just can't not, for those of us who are mothers. I should have done this differently, and such regret, such deep regret. But if you could hear this, we cannot offer our kids what we have not experienced ourselves. And I think Sherry said it earlier, we can't take someone farther than we have been willing to go ourselves. This I know. So the best thing we can do now, here, is to stay present and consider with curiosity, how is this for me? What has my experience been? What did my young self need and not get? What might it be like for you to allow yourself to consider memories like these, moments in your story where you've experienced heartache? Can you locate your young self there? And what's keeping you from seeing that little girl well? Because she suffered immensely in this world. You do not make it to adulthood in this broken, fractured, sin-laden world without experiencing immense heartache and harm and suffering. Your young girl, I imagine, needs the same thing that my young girl, my young self needed. Care, which involves kindness and comfort. She needs to be suffered, to grieve, and she needs an advocate. The advocate that she did not have back in those moments, most likely. And Dana talked about that too, what she wanted her mom so desperately to do on her behalf. The other morning I read in John 11 the story of Jesus when his dear friend Lazarus died and how Jesus responded to that. I looked that up too and looked at it a little more deeply. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who came with her also weeping, this was Lazarus' sister, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled. According to the original Greek, he was deeply moved from grief. He groaned in the spirit. He saw the sorrow of others, and he himself was sorrowful and was moved with sympathy and love. For the person who says, I've cried all the tears I could possibly cry with regard to my own story, all I can say is there is a reservoir held for you by the living God who has bottled every tear and knows every tear that has not yet been shed. So our tears are incomprehensibly glorious to God for him to hold them in that way. And so grief allows us the paradox of comfort. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
Thank you for listening to this excerpt of The Deepening Weekend with Robin Thompson on healing. There's more at the website, zoeoutpost.com. That's the shop where you can get this audio version of the Women's Deepening Weekend. Go to zoeoutpost.com and search The Deepening Weekend 2021.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.